Not everybody has to reply to every question. You know that. I mean, with only 20 minutes to go, I'm just hoping to get some comments. And I am watching the clock from that standpoint. So I'll just start this way. I really do hope that the small group engagements have been helpful, including tonight. I keep saying this, it's just a reminder, the workbook engagement and the small group encounter are as much a part of what this class has been about as all the other bells and whistles, readings, PowerPoint presentations, everything else. That's why time was always set aside every week as a part of the class time to actually engage with each other, though the amount of time varied, normally only when you had something that you needed to offer to the whole of the class as well, okay? So my first question is, if you think about the workbook, you've been through it twice now, what are some of the general strengths and maybe or limits to what the workbook accomplishes? As you think about that workbook as a whole, those individual lessons, what did you see that were, what important from the standpoint of a given strength that was in the book, or a challenge, something that challenged you that based on a limitation? So I'll shut up and see what you guys have to say. We are going to be here 20 minutes regardless. So, I can deal with silence if it comes to it. Colin?
I think some of it, some of the content gets really deep, and I think can be just going at it from what the time we had, it was hard to get through a whole week. Mm-hmm. So I think even if we had more time, especially if you're doing it in a small group context, some of those days almost seem like there's enough to talk about that one day could be a whole week instead of trying to do 4 days or 5 days in a week discussion.
Okay.
So I think some of it was, if you really wanted to have it be more meaningful, I think you'd even expand it longer and one day be a week. And so that's even longer. So.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's that the content per day during the week is so extensive or rich that there's easily a possibility of having a discussion around that individual day's exercises, much less trying to pack the whole week into a 30-minute conversation. Is that right? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I can come up with something. I enjoyed it. I thought what I liked about it was, obviously I knew the classroom was safe, and it left me very vulnerable, which is not a place I'd like to be, but it's a place I need to be. And okay. Going back and what I did, and I hit and missed and different stuff, that's what I took from it. And also, I remember in the beginning, there's like a question, I don't know if it's like your circle of influence, and I couldn't really think of friends. So I want to go back and rethink everything and redo it. And because I need to, it was helpful. Okay. That's what I'm trying to say.
So yeah. I'm hearing, both the strength, but also the necessity is that safe space to have these conversations. Mm-hmm. And I think, Tara, what I also heard was, though, that sometimes coming up with that circle of friends right at the very beginning, can be more of a challenge than mm-hmm. some people might realize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Other thoughts on that, or others?
I'll go. I think it was a really helpful piece to frame all of these as virtues that we're pursuing as Christians, but also just in light of the very short introduction to the virtues book early on, just in light of this class. That's what I'm trying to address. So I really like that was an early introduction, and the small group approach was really helpful. I have not had an online course yet in my third year have dedicated small group time. And so this helped me both just get to know people, which I think is hard for any distance student, but also to kind of integrate what we're learning in conversation rather than just an assignment. And so we could talk about, especially that first half of the semester, talk about how these different virtues like were lived out in our lives and hear how other people interpreted the virtues in different ways than I might have as I went through the workbook. So the small group part, I think, was essential to this course and something I wish other courses did too, but especially because of the subject matter.
Okay. And I think I hear, John, and you can correct me, that the fact that these were stable small groups, I mean, a lot of times in classes, you may have a breakout session, but they can be variable, where this actually allowed for the group to have time to interact and get to know each other while they're interacting with this content. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say that. And I didn't mind that they switched it up halfway through at Convene, that we got different groups. So long-term stability, not essential, but week after week stability was really helpful.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. That helps me, particularly in the conduct of the class, but also thinking about the workbook going forward from that standpoint. Anything else?
I was gonna say, I enjoyed the virtues that we're focused on. I don't know if there's just something different with my brain, but a lot of the exercises I just had a really hard time doing. I don't know if I experienced things and then kind of put them out of my mind. So then trying to come up with experiences and remember how I felt. And, again, maybe it's just something odd about me, but I had a really hard time articulating the way I felt in that time, or how I would feel in this moment thinking about that time. It was just, and I'm not someone that's super disconnected from my emotions, I don't think, but it was just they were awkward exercises, a lot of them for me, but I liked the focus of the virtues and what they were and practicing them.
Okay. Yeah, there is, I mean, the way the workbook is designed is really based on a lot of recollection, I guess is the one way to think about it, which might speak to certain types of learners as opposed to others from that standpoint. Amber, were you going to say something, or?
Yeah, there were some that were like so powerful that literally still stand out in my head, and are still messing with me, actually, in a good way. And then some I had trouble, like, kind of like Rochelle was saying, I had trouble even answering them. So then I thought, I think I'm not good at this one. Like, I think I'm not compassionate. And then I don't know now what to do about it, because I don't even know how to answer this question. I don't know how to connect. Like, so that I don't know what to do with that, except that was my experience a few times.
Amber, I hear that. So thank you for saying it. And I mean, I think performative mindsets definitely fit into graduate education to start with, right? So we're constantly thinking about our own evaluation of content and everything else. Just so, Amber, I'm just to let you off the hook. I don't think that meant you were bad at the virtue from that standpoint. It may just remind us again of how the exercises are. But if you're really worried about being compassionate, we can get you to the altar this Sunday and maybe really pound that one through before it's over with. I could probably get BJ and Cheryl on a plane, just so you know that, right? Okay, I'm being facetious. This doesn't help the evaluation. I can't help myself. But let me just name it. Thank you. This is again, these are the kind of things that are helpful. I think we write exercise. You guys know this. We write curriculum and we write exercises hoping many people will connect, but knowing that not everybody's going to connect every exercise might be really important in how the workbook's understood from that standpoint. So that's helpful. I'm going to move forward with these just to move forward to these other questions. I really do want you to keep thinking though about the strengths and hindrances, particularly if you write on this. This is the piece that really helps us think about how to make the workbook better over time. So I hope you hear that's very crucial. But this next piece is really more about ministry itself. I mean, would you use this as a process with others in ministry? So thinking about yourself as a co-laborer with other ministers, would this be something you would use? And if you would, what steps would be helpful, or what challenges do you see in trying to introduce this, maybe among staff or maybe, just with other ministers that you know from that standpoint? Thoughts?
I think as I thought about that question and with laity a little bit, I think as is with the staff would be fine. I think with laity, it may become a little more difficult. If you're doing it as a weekly staff meeting, part of your meeting to grow closer together, I think, you could ask staff to do a little bit more than you can laity sometimes to handle that. I think you'd have to go back for laity. I think you may have to go back to what Colin was saying and kind of break it up a little bit more. From leading small groups and Sunday school classes before, sometimes it's hard to get people engaged that much as far as it is in classes like that, as far as laity goes.
Okay. That's helpful, BJ. Other thoughts? Anyone?
Yeah, this might just be a reiteration of what BJ has said, but I'm just thinking from experience of leading my own like small groups and Sunday school groups. Like if the people aren't doing these exercises during the week, then it's almost impossible to talk about them and have any sort of like fruitful conversation in a small group meeting. So I don't know how to ensure that happens or how to get that buy-in, but I don't think this is going to work if people aren't actually participating in it.
Okay. That's been I'll just name it, Michelle. That's been an upfront piece in every way we've tried to orient churches, that this is not, those of us who've been in Sunday school classes, people come in and your first question is, who read the chapter last week? And you get like 3 hands. Those kinds of small group engagements are not going to work well with this. It does take more of a commitment. Any other concerns or thoughts when it comes to ministry, particularly?
Actually, I tried this method with one of our young adults groups, and we had a really good time through it. But the only thing was, as like other people just pointed out, it is hard for them to actually keep it up with, because it's really like content rich, and it's just like hard for them to like do it on a daily basis. So the way that I took was, we just do like a daily Zoom meeting for like 10-20 minutes, and just we just quickly talk about it and just wrap it up. Actually, that really helped for them to just keep tracking the process, but at the same time, it was without like actual encouragement from like a minister or leader. I believe it's going to be really hard for them to keep up.
Okay. So did you, John, just for clarification, did you actually meet with your small group on Zoom just to help them with the content each day, and then and then had a sort of a summative gathering with them to reflect upon the week's work later?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's what we did.
Okay. But I'm hearing timing was really important, just making sure that there was a steady dose of about 20 minutes from that standpoint. Okay.
So we just set up the time, like in like an end of the day around like 10 o'clock before you go to sleep. And I just talked to everybody what time is good for you. So you're supposed to be there, and everybody gather up together, and we quickly like talk about the questions and try to actually exercise the things together. And yeah, that's what we did.
Okay, so you were almost coaching them through the exercise each day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's pretty amazing. That's also pretty amazing to have a group that'd be willing to do that each day in some of our contexts. But I think that's a really novel way of thinking through that. Anything else on laity or ministers? I'll just kind of keep those bundled since BJ brought them up that way.
I think so. When I'm going to give an example, but the week that we did trust, that was a really powerful one that had me like, oh my word, the Lord trusts me. I have to trust other people, and I'm not trustworthy. And, like all of that was really kind of mind blowing for me, that the Lord has entrusted me with some things and I'm not trustworthy. And so then I have to trust other people with some things, even when they're not trustworthy. I'm wrestling with that still, because no, there are actually some situations where people should not be trusted. There just are. And then I'm like, oh, I know, God, I know I'm not trustworthy. Like I keep going back and forth. So there are like these huge questions that I'm left with. And then I'm wondering, like, how is that facilitated? How does that, who's facilitating this so that when people come with these kind of large questions, I don't know, you know,
Yeah, I hear,
I mean, like,
I hear that. And, you know, I think John Wesley a long time ago quickly identified that the quality of small group leadership is really important. So sort of how you prepare leaders who lead these groups, I think, maybe even having the leaders themselves. I'm just thinking out loud, so I hope you hear. This is not something that's been decided. Even having the leaders themselves go through it at their own speed before they actually lead one of these might be an interesting piece. It does raise questions about since Doug Hardy's been doing a lot of work on spiritual companioning, who goes down the journey with us will be, I think, one of the things that these kinds of experiences will kind of invoke. I mean, who's there to have those conversations with? Hopefully, either a pastor or some other leader that could be qualified to make that happen. So. And I'm not going to minimize I mean, I know you work in children's ministry, so thinking about who is trustworthy among children at times is a living conversation point in light of child safety. So hear me, I completely accept that as a real struggle. Okay, anything else? Or maybe let me go to the question 5. I know we only have about 3 more minutes. So what do you think should happen next? If we're going to, and I'm just looking for your feedback. If NTS has out of a series of conversations over the last couple of years have said, we think virtue formation is important and it is a part of the spiritual life of people. So we're going to make commitments to this. So far, it's routinized into this one class. I hope you hear that. Though we've done some experiments in other small groups. Dr. Prush has done, and she's far better at it than I am, to say the least. So that's part of it. But what else do you think might need to be done for the sake of your classmates, for the people coming into the seminary you might not even know? What recommendations might you make?
I think I would reiterate just what I said about the class in particular, having more of this sort of connection time for people. It doesn't necessarily have to be directly related to this workbook or to virtue formation, but just the building of relationships, I think, is really important at NTS for this sort of moral formation. Okay. The other piece that we just talked about briefly in our little small group was, I'm curious what a teenager as a youth minister or as a 20-something theologian would say is their best way to develop virtues. Because I think that academics and even some of us can come at these things from a book standpoint and want to go through a workbook together. But I'd be curious to see NTS kind of push into that college age range or recent college graduates and say, like, what are your daily habits? Like, how do you build virtues and characteristics that you're proud of? Because it might not be going through a workbook, and it might be, like Rochelle said, maybe an app, I don't know, a podcast, like other formats that people of a younger mindset, even younger than myself, are looking into for this sort of development process. I think NTS is in a good position to kind of pursue those angles.
Okay. Yeah, it invites us into some creativity and also gestures toward the theology and technology class, which is another animal altogether. So,
well, I thought of the Lectio Divino app that I use, and being able to go through, that, and thinking of the breathing exercises being built into the app and the different pieces, it maybe being more user friendly for some people I get up in the morning and I get on my phone and I read my Bible first, but then I do my Wordle and my Nerdle and my, all of those things. But then, doing the virtue formation in an app form. I know we shouldn't do everything on technology, but just it might be a more user-friendly thing or an option for some people that I think might work better than a workbook. I had a hard time with the breathing exercises in the workbook, and I know there was like a recording that we could listen to, but just to reading the instructions and trying to do them and close my eyes and then read the instructions and that kind of thing was difficult for me. So that's where, the app idea kind of popped in my head. And I know it's early days still, but something that might be worth considering at some point.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And actually, some of you noted some of the lessons have audio options, others did not. And I think the audio options might at least be more multimodal and more helpful from that standpoint to make sure that's included.
I think there's also something to be said about integration, and maybe this is because it's just what I just researched this and wrote on it, but virtue formation as its own project might be helpful, but virtue formation spread out across every course we take. And it is what I just wrote about at the undergraduate level, that we ministers can't form virtue on our own in people. We need other people helping us. And so as I think about our education, it'd be helpful, you hope that as we're studying the scriptures, that we're moving in a good direction, like this is morally formative, but to make it explicit and to say virtue formation is becoming a part of our Bible classes and our theology classes, this level of integration, so that it's no longer implicit. We are explicitly being taught and formed in virtue across all of our disciplines at the seminary. And that's what I'm talking to Mid-America about. Like, there's 4 chaplains on this campus. How in the world are we going to form 1,000 students without our faculty? We're not. And so looking for integration and how can we make this spill over into the rest of our life? And of course, I was writing about liberal arts education and how we ought to be studying why mathematics can make us a virtuous person. But anyway.
No, I hear that. And I'm watching the clock. So let me just say, Andy, I totally resonate with that. Actually, some of the work I've done thinking about Christian higher education really kind of resonates across that. So you're definitely onto the right track. And since I have a very good friend who is a professor of mathematics, who really lives the virtue of beauty, it's really giving them permission to do that kind of stuff, I think, is also helpful. It's not just telling them they need to do it, but helping them name that is crucial. All right, I'm going to honor the time. It's 7:03. So one, thank you. Thank you for the class. I know I'm just going to be vulnerable. Choosing to start new course preps at my point in the journey, and in doing so, taking on sometimes material that I had not engaged for the last 15, 20 years. So the Christian spirituality is returning to old friends. The virtue education is a bit newer to me, but even just introducing new coursework in a way that hopefully might be helpful is a pretty scary thing, even for a guy who's been at it as long as I am. So I've appreciated your attentiveness and diligence, and in the way I think you've learned from each other as much as you have from any of these presentations. So remember, many of my video presentations are still available on YouTube. So if you're having difficulty sleeping at night, you know where to go for a friend there, okay? It's better melatonin, I'm telling you right now. So just keep that in mind. And you do have my prayers, particularly over this season as you're finishing out this week, but definitely moving into this season of Advent and celebration of Christmas. I do look forward to seeing each and every one of you next spring, whether you're assigned to my class or not. So I'm not saying you all need to be signed up for my courses, but I do look forward to seeing you. So you just have my ongoing appreciation and prayer between now and then, okay? And when I'm grading your projects, just pray that I've read the forgiveness lesson this week, okay? As I go. So can't help myself. I got in with something that's a little bit bizarre, no doubt. Blessings to all. And if you have questions or concerns, reach out to me. Email's about as easy as anything, but if you need, we can schedule either a conversation by phone or by Zoom if that's needed, okay? All right, we'll see you guys.
Thank you, Dr. Blevins.
Thank you.
God's
See you
grace.
next,
everybody.
see you next semester.
Okay. All right, that's prayer request right there. So. All right.
Dr. Blevins,